All right, welcome TLCers to another fun conversation. Today's TLC conversation is around organizational models and their impact on your ability to deliver value. So thanks for coming. Our panel is a little smaller than normal, so they've graciously agreed to take their time and have an interesting conversation. This is going to be a great opportunity for those of you not on the panel who want to be a part of the discussion to ask questions and engage. So please don't hesitate to do so. Our panel today is Katherine Johnson, currently of T. Rowe Price, formerly of Lowe's and Best Buy. She's currently a senior manager of digital analytics and optimization, and she has more than 12 years experience in digital analytics and marketing. And she's here because her focus is on A/B testing and personalization, but she's also an advanced analytics guru and a pretty smart chick. So thank you, Katherine. And then Paula Sappington, which many of you have heard from on multiple occasions. She's been at Hilton forever. She has no other job history, just Hilton. She's very loyal, Hilton brands, yeah. She is the director of digital optimization and customer insights there, with 7 years in optimization and 14 years in enterprise consumer research. So welcome, Paula. Thank you both for joining. Most of you have met or chatted with Melanie in the past. She is formerly of American Express and Dell, and I can announce today she's part of Search Discovery. Yay! Welcome, Melanie. So big news. We hired Melanie. She started last week. So she's very new at Search Discovery. So she has more than 7 years experience in optimization, program leadership, and strategy, and 10 years prior to that in program and project management, and including that, I guess. Anyway, Mel is going to help me out today so that I don't spend too much time coughing in your ears as I'm thank you, yes, getting over a cold. Melanie's going to serve as both moderator and panelist today, and I'm probably going to try to stay on mute. So I'm going to let you guys kick off the conversation, and let's get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. So I am not the master moderator that Kelly is, so everybody take it easy on us today. And you would really help us out if any questions you have along the way, if you'll put them in the Slack channel for TLC calls or in the chat for Zoom. That'll help keep the conversation going, especially since we're a small panel today. But I think the best way for us to start off is, the org structure where we, kind of where we currently are. And Katherine, you have an edge on us, given that you've been in similar roles in a few different companies. It'll be interesting to hear how those differ.
Sure.
So we will start with you, and we'll talk to Paula.
Sure. So I'll give a little bit of background with each of the companies I've worked at and what that organizational structure looked like. I started at Best Buy, and Best Buy was interesting because it's probably, a lot of these are probably a combination of a centralized and decentralized setup. But the way we were set up there is I was on the analytics team, but I was dedicated 100% to testing and optimization and had a couple people that helped with the analysis of tests there. We had project managers, there's 2 or 3 of them at any given time, and they kind of owned the testing process as such. And then we had dedicated developers and dedicated creative folks that helped with the tests. And we all reported up through our individual business units, but we worked as a centralized team. And so I really felt as if I was part of this testing team. We just reported differently. And so at Best Buy, the advantages of that were we were all 100% dedicated to testing. And everyone knew the strategy. Everyone was part of the conversations, part of the prioritizations. Everyone was always on the same page, supporting that. Some of the cons with that is we may not always be as close to the individual business lines that were coming in with different testing ideas. We really just kind of funneled them in and worked through them, get the results out. Another challenge was that the project managers were really the area that owned the testing. And so they were kind of pushing their own agenda, which was really more focused on velocity of tests and always trying to say yes to everybody. And so other areas such as the analytics that may have been trying to drive more valuable tests based on data that we could gain from it, or based on data to drive the ideas that we're doing, it was sometimes kind of a battle there. So the team worked really well together, but based on where it was owned, that kind of made it the priorities a little different at times. At Lowe's, that was a different setup. I was again in the digital analytics team, and my team focused on testing, and we did the project management of all the tests. We managed prioritization, we managed making sure the roadmaps were correct, and of course did all the analysis with that. We did not have any dedicated developers or content folks to help us. We would just have to go out and ask for those support roles as they were needed. As the program developed, we were eventually able to get dedicated developers, pseudo-dedicated developers. We at least had a process so that when we needed something done, it could go into their queue and that work would get done. And so it was starting to form this team that could work a little bit more closely together. That worked pretty well at that point because I owned the testing projects and we were in analytics. A lot of our testing was driven by data and hoping to get those results so that data could be used for the decisions. Towards the end of my time at Lowe's, we actually moved and were reorganized, and we were put into the daily operations team, which was really bizarre. And priorities changed, and they really were trying to have us focus only on tests that could be developed and implemented today. And so if we were testing a brand new idea that needed brand new development to implement, they didn't want to do it. And so that is kind of a whole other story of where testing should sit. Now I'm at T. Rowe Price, have been there for about 6 months or so, and they have more of a hub and spoke organization for testing. I'm in that hub right now, small hub of me, but we have the different business lines that we support at different maturity levels. And one of the business lines is up and running, and we're considering them one of the mature business lines. And in that role, we help support and guide on some more advanced topics and just discuss best practices and some things like that. And then the other business lines are very young in the maturity level, and we're just trying to get up. I think at most one of them has 2 tests that they've run. And so each of these business lines are running their own programs as such without much interaction. I shouldn't say much interaction, but without crossover or leveraging what we're learning from the others. So hopefully that this hub position will help get that information out across all those lines and bring everyone kind of in a general best practice and following some of the things and learning from others' tests. But that's kind of a high level of the different organizations that I have worked in.
And at T. Rowe, are you, it sounds like it's more of an advisor role potentially than being in the weeds with the actual development. Are you guys, who's developing the tests?
So it depends on the business line and the maturity level of it. So that the business line that is very mature is more of that advisor role, and we discuss the tests and the analysis and the results and kind of that high level information there. And they have front-end developers or specialists that they can work with that they develop the tests. Okay. And they do all of that work, and I'm kind of helping them as they need it. The other lines that are brand new and haven't tested, I'm actually in the tool helping develop the tests. I'm not a developer, so when we need to get a developer, we'll reach out and get that support. But that's a much more hands-on, in the weeds, in the dirt, helping them to develop and hopefully teaching them and having them grow into being able to run their own programs, similar to what this other group is already able to do.
Okay, so the goal of your org, and is it more than just you at this point?
It's just me.
It's just you. Okay.
Yeah.
So the goal of you,
yes,
is to be more in that trusted advisor role as you get these business lines up to a level of maturity where they can manage their own development. And in terms of analytics, are they doing their own analyses, or?
It's a mix. Although I say it's only me, I do have other folks on my team that are that support analytics. And so for more complicated tests or for a different business line, that person might come in and help. The line of businesses will do the initial high level and get into some deep dive dive analytics, and I've given them some tools to go a little deeper. So it's kind of a mix, just depending upon what the needs are. And if it's something new that we're going into and exploring, I'll certainly get my hands dirtier as needed. So it's whatever support is needed at any given time to get that test or that program where it needs to be.
Okay, awesome. Cool. And I'm sure we're going to go back and touch on some of those things in a little while. I wanted to switch over to Paula and hear about, I think you pretty much built out that program at Hilton, right?
Yeah, we started our optimization program about 7 years ago when we launched an entirely new platform and fully new redesigned websites. So the minute we launched those sites, thankfully somebody was channeling Gary, I suppose, and really wanted to focus on continuous improvement. So the minute we launched those sites, we started optimizing. We have a very interesting setup here at Hilton. My vertical is actually in IT. So unlike probably most of you on the call, I sit in the IT org. My VP is the head of design, development, and delivery. So the creative team and the optimization team and the development team are all one big group. So it's a fantastic model for us. I think a lot of that is due to our leadership. I think that makes a big difference. But so we sit in IT. The head of creative is actually my direct boss. So we have an interesting dynamic with the other areas in the business, like digital strategy and marketing and analytics. So we have an overall customer group that IT reports into. So that the overall customer structure includes IT. It also includes digital strategy and marketing. So we all report up to the same SVP. And the head of digital strategy actually sets the optimization priorities for us. So I have this wonderful sort of off the grid piece of heaven where I have this vertical integration that Gary's talking about. I manage the program through a governance process that includes that head of digital strategy, my VP, the head of digital design, development, delivery, and then the head of creative, the product owners for the various platforms, and then an analytics resource. So analytics is a completely separate group, even from customer, which is interesting. But for our optimization program, we actually rely solely on the data we get out of the Maximizer tool. Reason for that is that we switched data analytics platforms a couple of years ago, and we haven't fully integrated Maximizer into Adobe yet. We're still working on that. But so as the Adobe integration grows, so will our measurement scenarios. But for now, we kind of are our own island of optimization. So, but currently today, we're really only customer facing web and app optimization. Very soon, we will be a little more omni-channel, wrapping in the call centers, the on-property experiences, things like that. So we're growing and becoming more agile, but that's how we're laid out right now.
Awesome. It does sound like you have a really nice scenario there. So let me just circle back. I want to make sure I didn't miss this. As part of your org, you said you guys you kind of rule by governance, this governance team that's part of that. Do you have all of the resources within your vertical to deliver your optimization? Do you have devs? Do you have, I know you said analytics was a separate org, but do you have analysts that are specific for optimization within your purview? Are all of those resources part of your vertical? You're on mute, Paula.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. Sorry. Yes, we actually do have all the resources we need, which is fantastic. Interestingly, just because of the legacy scenario that we have, all of our campaigns are actually coded by Maximizer. So we are fully full service with them. That's one of the shifts that will be happening probably over the next 3 to 5 years as we bring that in-house. But today, all of that is managed through my team. So again, it's a lovely way to be off the grid and do what we need to do without getting in the way of Hilton Dev. So yeah, we do have all the resources in terms of analysis. That's basically what my team does, is they design the tests and then analyze the results, because the coding and all those specifics happen with Maximizer. So,
and when you guys are doing your ideation for tests, I know you said analytics again is a separate org, and the data that you have is coming out of Maximizer, so it's specific to the tests you've run. You know, that the data that you have is specific to what you've asked it for. When you are ideating, are you using just the learnings from your tests, or are you taking in analyses from that outside analytics team?
Mostly the latter. We're mostly pulling data from Adobe tracking, anywhere on the site or the apps that we're looking at. Yeah, and then we just really the only time we're excluding that Adobe data is we're not matching up the Maximizer data on the back end to make sure that it fits. And we can't do all of the pathing and such that we know we'll be able to do once we're fully integrated. But yeah, that's the data analytics is the backbone of our ideation mentality.
Awesome. Okay, so putting on my panelist hat for a second, I can tell you about my last couple of orgs. They're pretty different. American Express, and I should also say I've been through 3 reorgs at American Express since I started, or while I was there. So the org dynamics changed pretty significantly over time. When I started, it was the team I joined had been an analytics team, a straight up, digital analytics team focused on the homepage and then everything behind the authentication on the Amex website. And they were just starting to do testing. So I had the chance actually to kind of direct how we built out the org. And we got, in-house resources pretty quickly, just a couple. So we had basically someone who functioned as a technical project manager, and then one person who was more of a really senior front-end dev person. But we, just like Hilton, started off having Maximizer do 100% of our build. So while we did have technical resources, they functioned more as technical liaisons between our product teams and Maximizer to gather requirements and define what would need to go into a test build. They were not actually doing any build. We, not as part of our testing team, but as part of our org, we did have basically like an in-house design agency. So we were able to utilize them for our design requirements, and anything we couldn't cover, we used Maximizer for overflow. And then we really quickly, we were aligned with sort of a Centers of Excellence analytics team that was part of our larger org. Initially, we were just basically in their backlog with any test results. We did not have dedicated resources. By the time I left, we had, besides our 2 initial tech resources who are still part of that org, we had we had 2 in-house developers, 3 full-time contractors that basically were in-house developers. So a total of 5 front-end developers and 3 dedicated analytics resources. So that made for a pretty good, robust capability, programming capability. Now, as things changed on the website, it kind of impacted how we were able to deliver in terms of velocity. But think that org structure worked pretty well. What was missing, and what I always push for, and it never actually happened, was to get us vertically aligned with design, and also with our qualitative research. We have MX. Anybody who's heard me talk on the TLC panel before probably knows really well that MX is extremely dedicated to voice of customer. They love nothing more than hearing what their customers think. So qual research is a huge part of building out our testing roadmap. That was a big part of our ideation process. Beyond, obviously we were using data to support it, but a big part of the evidence that we used for the ideas that we went after was also the qual research, because when you're working with folks who rely on that, if you don't include it, you're alienating a big part of what's core to the business. So we never got to that point. I think that would have made the ultimate optimization org for MX. At Dell, we had really just one significant reorg while I was there. Kelly probably witnessed more of the maturity process about how that org was built out. But we had semi-dedicated dev resources. I would say probably 75%. I mean, there were definitely times that other things were happening in the org and our resources got pulled away, but it was, that was the exception, not the rule. We became part of the design org, about probably halfway through my time there. And that was awesome. Sitting in the room with the designers and, knowing what they were working on, what they were thinking, aligned with the data that we were seeing, was incredibly powerful in terms of ideating. And I'll also say we went through 2 site redesigns at Dell while I was there. And the first one, we had just joined the testing org had just joined the design org, and they were not interested in testing out their ideas, and things did not go swimmingly. And it was
that's a big understatement.
I'm being kind. But it was a huge, I would have to say I wouldn't undo that, because the lessons learned from that experience really unlocked the doors for us in terms of, a real appreciation of what testing can do. So with the second reorg, we were sitting right there with the designers. We were deconstructing their concepts and testing them in consumable chunks to our customers well before anything was rolled out. So it obviously completely changed what happened in terms of redesigns and design thinking, and integrating data with design thinking. So I have to say, from my obviously limited experience in 2 different enterprises, that if you have an org where you can marry up design with optimization, it's a really great thing. So, do we have any questions we want to address initially? Anything that came out of the first round of conversation that we want to dive into further? Do you have your hand raised, Kelly? Unmute.
I have a question. So what you described, Katherine, is the hub and spoke, kind of the centralized mode. And Paula, what I didn't catch from you was if you guys were all centralized or if there was a decentralization. Is all testing owned in your group? And then Mel, I know that Dell's was totally centralized with no decentralization, but did you have multiple teams doing testing at Amex? So I'm just kind of trying to see how, if you think about it, like I've seen programs where they have like 4 different teams all doing testing and there's no connections with any of the teams, and you don't know what each other's doing. And then there's a super centralized mode where you own the entire roadmap. Even if other teams are doing the testing, you won the central hub owns the optimization. And I'm just curious what your all's experiences are with those and what works well and what doesn't.
I can start. Am I unmuted? Yes. So so we are fully centralized. Again, we are just optimization for the consumer-facing websites and apps. About 3 years ago, we did try a mini bit of decentralization where that digital strategy team that I mentioned earlier wanted to start doing some quote-unquote smaller tests that were really more marketing and content related, because we continued to get those questions. And much of what we do, frankly, is complex functionality based optimization. So those kind of content marketing type tests sort of get deprioritized just by nature of what they are. So we decided to try a little experiment, and it was a disaster. Mainly because our leadership wants clean data through the funnel. So they want to be able to measure every test with, its own swim lane through the conversion funnel. And so the smaller tests just continued to get deprioritized, or they got in the way. And the communication was a mess, and it was kind of a disaster. So we are back to where we were, which was fully centralized. And so far that's worked well for us. But again, I think it's working. The key to that is that governance structure that we have with that really open communication of that integration between all those departments.
How does that impact the volume of testing you can do?
It has decreased it for sure. When we had to go all clean. However, Hilton is blessed with a whole lot of traffic, so we divide out swim lanes as much as we can, and we have also convinced the business to really just test. Not everything has to be tested through to conversion. Not everything is going to make a confident impact on conversion. So we need to stop that. So micro conversion is something that we lean on a lot, and therefore we can increase our volume greatly.
And I guess for me, I don't think I've ever been in a truly fully decentralized organization where people are out doing their own testing and not communicating to anything. So I can't really speak to that, but I can imagine it would not go well. Just knowing about the challenges that we have when there is some oversight across all the different tests that are happening, and watching out for collisions and how things are impacting each other. So I haven't been in an organizational structure with any of the companies yet that I have thought that this is just horrible. They're all just different.
Get myself unmuted. Yeah. So at Amex, it was neither fully decentralized nor really hub and spoke. There are pockets. There were little pockets of testing orgs, but they were very marketing focused. So the things that Paula is talking about, the little content tests, things that can be done, tests that can be built with a WYSIWYG editor, those are the kinds of things those other orgs primarily were testing. And we sort of functioned, our team sort of functioned as the COE for testing. We did, communicate with each other. We had almost like quarterly testing, summits internally where we, talked about what was working, what wasn't. We were all using Maximizer or some combination of Maximizer and Target. Those folks that were doing a lot of WYSIWYG stuff, they use Target quite a bit. So we had tactical summits. We didn't share learnings across the orgs a whole lot, just because there was not, except for one other team, there really wasn't overlap in the kinds of things we were looking at or our target audience. So yeah, it was actually neither. We were all on our own little islands, and we would cast a a message in a bottle off every once in a while, but primarily decentralized. And of course, or centralized within our orgs. And of course, Dell was, completely centralized. So, did that cover it, Kelly, or was there any more detail you were looking for there? Okay, cool. I think one of the things that's interesting that we didn't dive into too deeply, Paula mentioned the fact that her vertical is up through the IT organization. I'm curious, Katherine, for you, and then of course I can talk about my experience as well. How much, you've been in 3 different orgs. I've been in a couple of different ones. Which vertical, what umbrella did you fall under, and did it make a difference, in those in the organizations?
So at Best Buy, I fell under the digital analytics team, and then supported the testing through that. And the biggest challenge there was that the roadmap was owned by a different area, and so the challenge we had was getting them to really focus on the data-driven reason to test and using those results to make data-driven decisions. They weren't always understanding of all of that. So from that standpoint, it would get a little challenging being in the analytics vertical, trying to push an analytics-driven agenda in a group that owned it who didn't quite understand it. That may have just been more of the structure of the people that were on the teams at the time. But there was a lot of back and forth at Best Buy. Should testing be owned by, or should the roadmap for testing be owned by that analytics team portion of the group, or should it stay over on this other side? And they kept it on the other side. So that part was a challenge. At Lowe's, when I started there, it was in the analytics team as well. And that worked well because it was really just our team kind of driving everything and reaching out to the resources as we needed them. So of course I liked that one because we didn't have other people telling us, we had other people telling us their agenda, but because we owned the roadmap and owned what we were doing and what we were able to bring in and why we would test something versus not, it was a little more easy to control those good tests versus the ones that didn't have the traffic or we didn't see as much value in for whatever various reason. And at Hero, I sit in an analytics vertical as well now. And because I'm new to this company and new to this true hub and spoke type environment, I'm still learning to trying to figure out what the pros and cons of all of it are. But it's nice being that centralized area that I can look across and see what all of these different business lines are doing and see what has worked for the team that has already established a good practice and take those learnings and help build out the other teams and look at ways that we can share across each other. Share the learnings of the tests across the organization. And so this current state feels a little different that I'm still trying to work out, again, what those pros and cons are. But so far, I haven't, I think the biggest challenge we have is that each business line will need to find their own resources for the testing. And that kind of becomes potentially a little redundant at times. And oftentimes that person that each different business line will be going to could end up being the exact same person, but being approached from different ways. So I think as we grow this out at T Rowe Price, we'll be looking at ways to be more efficient with how we share these resources overall. But that's kind of where I have fallen.
Yeah. And at Amex, again, been having gone through a couple of reorgs, we started off in IT on the technology side of things, and I thought that was a little odd initially. But I will say that in hindsight, we functioned best in that org because our dedicated technologists, our devs and our technical PM, they all fall under the IT umbrella. So, initially we were all part of the same org. As things reorged and we moved more into, first marketing and then to the overall consumer business side of things, there was sort of that, that little invisible shield between us and the technology side. So even though we had, dedicated resources, those dedicated resources were not reporting to us. They had a different line, a different vertical in terms of leadership, and they had their own priorities. So over the last year, that has really had a significant impact on how Amex is able to deliver tests, potentially, because there are some competing / somewhat conflicting priorities between technology and marketing. So even though it coming from Dell, where we were part of design, and before that, I don't even know what you would call the org that we were before design, because it was a vertical dedicated to e-commerce. And it was almost
Edel.
Yeah, it was Edel, and it was it had all of those things. It had marketing, it had technology, so it was a separate little, almost like a completely separate business within Dell. But anyway, coming from that design side, and feeling the positive, the positivity that came from that going into the IT sound felt weird. But there were definitely some benefits. There are benefits to both. If we could just find like that perfect IT design combination, that would be awesome. It sounds like Paula's got it. We can just all be jealous of Paula. Any questions we want to hit on before I just hit my next notes? Okay, so we've talked about what our organizations look like, the verticals they kind of report up through. We've talked about what's included in those orgs, and we've talked a little bit about how analytics fits in. I think we've covered that pretty well. I guess one question that I have for you guys, and that I think is an interesting topic. We talked about centralized versus decentralized, but what we haven't really talked about is how testing is treated. Is it treated as an operational arm of marketing, an operational part of your organization, or is it treated almost like an in-house agency or a department of its own that has a sort of an independent perspective? Paula, I'll start with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I think ours is the latter. We're kind of an independent agency, and I think what is also interesting about the way we are structured is that digital strategy is separate from marketing, is separate from analytics. And so digital strategy is sort of consuming the analytics that they're getting. They're also hearing from marketing and from our brands, but they're making their own decisions about what's right on our digital platforms. And that's the group that sets my strategy. So optimization is really driven by that group, which is not married to any of the other typical groups that are involved with testing. So they're kind of, they're sort of an island, and then we're their delivery island, if that, to continue the metaphor. So yeah, I would say we are very independent. And like our governance, I mean, our budget is independent, our governance is completely managed through that group. So we are very much off the grid.
Okay. Do you see is there any downside to that you can see?
No.
I appreciate the short answer. All right, cool. Katherine, how about you?
So at T Row, like I said, I'm still trying to bring up a lot of the other business lines that are just starting, but it's kind of independent within the business line. And of course, now with my role coming in, just trying to help with that. At Lowe's, we were trying to be independent, but everyone had opinions of what we should do, and so it's kind of whoever was the loudest got the action. More from senior management complaint and my manager coming to me saying this is the route you have to go. And so that towards the end got a little bit better as we started really focusing with the creative team and more partnering with them to come up with ideas and focusing on that. And then if other little one-off tests came in, we'd do those as we could. Best Buy was really, we were kind of a centralized team that took intakes from ideas. We were not coming up with anything of our own to go out and test. We were really just servicing whatever came through.
Okay.
But, yeah.
And I mean, having experienced both sides of that, do you have opinions about the pros and cons?
The cons at Best Buy was that we were always just being told we weren't coming up with anything that we thought was good. I mean, if a test came back and we saw some good reasons to do an iterative test, we would certainly make those recommendations, and we might be able to get tests like that through. But if we saw something that was new and exciting, and this was also the case at Lowe's, if through the data that we were seeing we saw opportunity, we'd have to go out and really sell it to the business, and if it wasn't part of their strategy or their roadmap at the time, it would just fall flat. So trying to balance that was challenging. I think it would have been nice to have a little more control to help understand what the strategy was and what the goals were for the business, but maybe help drive what tests might have been smarter to help reach those instead of having to just do what the business's ideas were. So partnering a little bit more in those conversations would have been helpful. At T-Row, with the new business lines that are getting started with testing, it's really, right now we're in such that young discovery phase that it's a really good partnership. We're understanding what their goals are, and we're talking about ways that they think that they could reach them, and then they're receptive to, hey, I see this opportunity, this worked here, and so it's much more conversational because of how young and fresh it all is. So I think it was different in each organization, but I wish that in a lot of those organizations we could have used the data and what we saw as testers and coming out of those results to help drive and help the business change that strategy a little bit.
Yeah. And I've been on both sides of things as
Mm-hmm.
well. At Dell, we were, I would say 80% data-driven test ideas that were coming through, sort of the testing COE. They were coming from our analytics teams, upstream, analyses. They were diving in and pulling the data that would inform the test ideas. So, we would work with those business lines and say, here's what we're seeing, here's how we think we can address that. And of course they came to us with ideas too, but I would say at least 75% were coming from the analytics side of things. Amex, not so much. And again, it's part of its maturity, right? Because Dell was a fairly mature program. Amex, I walked in at the at ground level. So when you're going through the process of winning hearts and minds and trying to get folks to invest in and be part of a testing program, you do a lot of things that aren't necessarily the most data-driven or the best ideas, but they're the things that are initially they're the things that are important to those businesses. So we did, we sort of evolved to a point where it became more of a 50-50 relationship. And again, until this past year, a lot of changes in the org kind of pushed it more to be more on the operational side of things, which I'm not a fan of that. What happens or what can happen, and I think one thing that any younger organizations maybe need to think about, one of the mistakes we made is that the business units, they did see the value of testing. They were really invested in it. But they also realized that we had a tool that could deliver things for them that they could not get through any of their other avenues of engineering, and development delivery. So unfortunately, it became a case of, half of it or half of what we did were probably pretty good, data-driven test ideas, and half of what we did were filling the gaps for engineering. So that's
a really expensive CMS tool.
Exactly. So I would say that's a pitfall to watch out for. It requires some really strong leadership to not allow that to happen. But so we were sort of a hybrid of, trusted advisor, working really closely with these businesses and being a delivery engine for a lot of marketing, honestly. So just a little thing to watch out for. If you start seeing your org going that direction, raise a flag, because it's really difficult to undo it once you start doing it. It's really hard to stop doing it. My 2 cents worth.
I agree. Hey, Mel, can I revise my answer a little bit?
Yes.
From before, when you asked, are there any downsides? There is absolutely a downside to my structure. So for less mature orgs that are kind of thinking about how to structure, we are again in a very unique situation in that we completely changed web analytics tools a few years ago. So Adobe is still sort of becoming integrated in the business, and us being completely separate from the analytics org, is working and has worked only because of that. So as it becomes more entrenched and integrated, that's going to become more of a challenge. And there will definitely be a need for greater integration with the analytics team. And whether that's, having just someone embedded in the optimization program that sits on the digital team, on the analytics team, but is embedded with us, or vice versa. I don't know what that looks like. But that will definitely become an issue at some point.
Good point. Yeah, it's all about where you are on that maturity curve. All right, I've hit on all of the things that I had sort of wanted to touch on and make sure we talked about. Are there questions? Are there anything that I missed that you guys are curious about? Kelly, any questions from you?
I have a question. This is Lee. And it applies, I'm curious to understand from all three of your experience, just having been in both matrix and vertical environments. With analytics being centralized, how do you guys partner with, dev teams that's all over? That's kind of in different stacks and different parts of, and I don't know if this applies into in different stacks and different code base, to ensure that, we're getting the data we need. That's one question. The second question was, how do you ensure they're also doing it, do you guys provide the business requirements, a standard business requirements across the board? Just because their code base isn't always the same. So a standard business way of implementing it may not apply, I guess.
So you're specifically asking about the dev processes?
Yeah.
I mean, I can speak for Amex. Again, it was, I think, really one of the most important people or roles in our org was that technical PM role. And he acted as that person that, went out and figured out, what are the requirements going to be from a code perspective, because our site, it was on three separate code bases. And we had tests that would cross those code bases. So, it makes for a complex test build, obviously, but you need that person who is, number one, expert enough to understand the requirements, and second, has a PM kind of functionality, who is leaving the front end devs alone and going and figuring these things out, what the requirements are, and then coming back to the team. That's what worked for us. I've seen it done differently. At Dell, everything from a dev perspective was done by committee. You know, they all met together once a week and hashed things out. That's how they handled it. To me, that feels a less agile and less, you know, efficient. That's how we've handled it. Katherine or Paula, do you guys have anything to share?
At Best Buy, we were lucky because we had dedicated developers on our team, and so we would just put out our requirements, and they would go and take care of it, and they would talk to whoever they needed to, and if there were any of those challenges, it was their role to resolve it. At Lowe's, it was a pretty small organization, and so again, I had IT folks and developers that I could work with directly to handle things like that. And at T Row, I do have a technical resource who was involved very closely with the integration of Target into the site and everything. And so really he's just kind of our consultant. I haven't seen any tests come across that would require us to go across platform yet, so I don't know how that will work there. But usually it's having that resource that you can trust that can help you navigate it that is needed.
And from my perspective, we have Maximizer does our dev, so.
Oh yeah.
That makes it easy. Everything you said, Melanie, about the PM scenario.
And Lee, one other thing I would say, Amex, again, our environment got much more complex over this past year as we started moving to React. And so our dev has become a little less centralized as a result because of the way our engineering team has chosen to integrate testing. So we do now, I keep saying we, I've only been gone for a few weeks, so you'll have to forgive me. Kelly's not going to forgive me. But anyway.
You're mine now.
So there were developers, actually it was dispersed, right? There were developers on the individual teams for those products in addition to our developers on the testing side. So it did make things more complicated, but we had to get on their backlogs, go through all of those processes. So I feel your pain if that's what you're having to do. We worked with 6 engineering teams, and getting on backlogs and then getting them aligned was a painful process. But again,
cats.
That technical project manager, he's still my best friend.
Yeah, that is the pain where I try to get into everybody's PBL, especially if you find an issue and they've already moved on.
Yeah.
They're looking at other things. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're down to our last 3 minutes. So
I need to step in for a sec, if you don't mind. If anybody has any last questions, go ahead and throw them in the Slack or the group chat while I struggle through this last few seconds. We are running low on scheduled topics. We have, I believe, 2 more topics. Our next call, the advanced call, will be on February 2nd, and I encourage everybody to join. Invite your friends. It should be really fun and interesting. We're just going to have Matt Gershoff. And I paid good money to go to a workshop that Matt did on machine learning. And he's going to actually share a lot of the content that he shared at that workshop with you guys in 2 weeks on February 2nd. And it's hilarious and really, really informative. So it's going to be awesome. So come to machine learning 2 weeks. It's going to be great. You won't regret it. After that, we're talking about selecting the right KPI and testing design in general. How do you, set up the test so that you can actually learn something and take action, make decisions, that kind of thing. Should be a pretty engaging topic. I still need a couple of panelists. I have a few, but would like to have some more so that we've got more backups than I had this time. So if anybody's interested in that topic, please send me a note. And then, as I said, we're low on topics, and I'd like to get those scheduled out. So anybody has any topic recommendations, suggestions, or requests, send those to me through Slack or email, and we'll get going for the rest of 2018. Thank you so much, Melanie, for covering for me today. Great job, all three of you, considering it was a kind of a difficult topic to dive into. You guys did a great job. So thank you, everybody. Any last questions from anyone? All right, I think I'll give everybody 1 minute back. Have a great weekend. I really appreciate my panel. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.